It takes about 20 minutes to get the vitamin D you need. So you're supposed to be in the sun for 20 minutes. After that, your skin starts to burn, which is the signal that you're done. It actually is telling you you have enough vitamin D. Why? Because if you have too much, it's actually toxic in nature. You can't overdose on vitamin D. You'll get calcification, plaque, and amongst other things. So we need the right amount of vitamin D. Yes, protect yourself. Yes, don't make yourself sick. There's other ways to do it with minerals, zinc, things of that nature. And just know that if you do burn, you're not supposed to. It probably has to do with the food you're eating and the state that you're in, as opposed to the sun, which is meant to be healing.
Kashif Khan is an author, speaker, and founder of the DNA Company, where personalized medicine is being pioneered through unique insights into the human genome. You know, we're smack dab in the middle of summer right now.
Yeah.
And, you know, just certain things we just, especially in our culture, we are inundated with that are harming our health and we're completely unaware of it.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to create an episode that was dedicated to some of these summer fun / dangerous things that we might be exposed to and how we can upgrade things and enjoy this weather, you know, have fun with our families, but also keep everybody safe. And I want to start off by talking about something we've all experienced before, getting into a hot ass car, you know, that's sitting out in the sun, and why that might be exposing us to some very dangerous chemicals.
Yeah, so the nature of research, it's typically not so functional, meaning it's not applied in a practical context, like you driving in your car in the summer. It's a chemical studied on paper, not in the context, right? And so when you get in your car in the summer, the same chemicals that in a lab or in a facility are deemed as safe, in that boiling heat, all of a sudden aren't, right? And so there's some data that just came out. They took 101 vehicles, and it was, the key thing is these were new vehicles, 2015 plus, because every year we have more regulation around more chemicals and more things that are needed. So you're not seeing this in the older vehicles. Newer vehicles, over 100 of them, 100% of them had carcinogenic chemicals in them. So they're TCIPP, it's a fire retardant that's used in the foam in the seat. So it's meant to be protective, right? The question is, you know, how many cars get in a catastrophic I'm on fire situation versus every single person is going to be breathing that stuff in. So you're weighing, you know, the good and the bad. Right. So so the straight out carcinogen. And when you put the heat into the context, the summer heat, you have a minimum double exposure, but on average it's 5 times. So you have 5 times more likelihood of breathing this stuff in that most people can't detoxify.
Oh man, that's crazy. And so, you know, just like you said, being able to look at the pros and cons of this and the chemicals that are being used, like how many people have seats that are catching on fire. Yeah. Well, actually, fun story. But also, you know, there are things that can negate things like this, but it was a mistake that I made it being a young, foolish kid. And my mom had an Audi station wagon that was super old. We'll just say this was 1998 and the car was from like 1980 something, right? And so the battery was under the back seat. All right. First, this is already sounding not like a good idea. All right. The battery's under the back seat. The battery died. And so I took a battery out of another car and put it in there just to get to school, right? I was in college. And the battery was too tall. And so it was actually bumping up against some of the metal under the seat. Caught on fire in the middle of the street. All right, so I'm driving around like that for a couple of days. Then now it decides to catch on fire right in the middle of the street. I'm just a block from my university. And so I jump out the car in the middle of the street, toss the back seat out into the street. But yeah, this was a 1 in a billion chance that I'm going to have a fire in my car. And that reminds me of I didn't have an air conditioner in that car. And so just de facto, I had the windows rolled down. And so I would imagine just knowing that obviously the sun is going to be baking some of these chemicals and pulling them out. And we could even smell a lot of this stuff, to be honest. Would just simply rolling the window down or keeping the window cracked during the summer be a good idea while we're driving?
Just that one thing makes a huge difference, and we don't because we're trying to keep the AC in, right? So even the first couple minutes you're in there to ventilate, because it's sitting there in the heat and all those volatile organic compounds are coming out. You want to clear them out. Then you turn the AC on. Then you get going. You know, and people, I actually posted about this online, and somebody commented that, but you got to block the pollution out, right? So our vehicles have the HEPA filters, they do the job, but you have no idea if you're concerned about pollution, what's happening with indoor air quality. You know, there's a study that just came out from some university in Holland that North American, Western European, and industrial nation air quality is 4 to 5 times worse outdoor now. So we used to escape that pollution by coming inside. So the same thing is true in your home, because you have a drywall box that doesn't breathe. We don't open the windows, and you're full of fragrances, chemicals, etc. that as they heat up, also the same effect. They become much more potent and much more available and much more toxic.
So you mentioned having a filter, a HEPA filter in the car. Is that something else that we can, and I never thought about this before, maybe we can get like a portable, smaller version for the car?
Oh yeah, easy to find. They're very easy to find. So small, easy thing to do that will really clear a lot of nonsense out.
Okay,
Yeah.
Got it. So practical applications here. If you can, and you don't got to do this every single minute that you're in the car, but at least sometime crack that window open, because I see this, being in LA, I see people, obviously like on the highway, all the windows are up, and, we are dealing with a lot of exhaust and whatnot, all these different chemicals on the highway. But I very rarely ever see, even if it's not a backed up highway situation, people with their windows down here.
Yeah.
And it's just like keeping this in mind, crack your window, let some fresh air in, and let some of this toxicity out. And also, possibly look at maybe getting a small filter for your car. Is there anything else that we can do?
The other consideration is, newer cars, right? We love the new car smell. It's exciting. It's like, there's my ROI on the money I just spent, right? That smell, anytime you smell it, wherever it is, that's the sign that you need to air it out. So just being aware, right? Knowing that you're not supposed to smell anything. That thing you're smelling is what's hurting you slowly. So if you can still smell it, you haven't done the job yet of airing it out, right? So knowing that first.
Wow.
Yeah.
That makes me think about when you might go get your car washed or something. And they ask, like, do you want the new car smell?
Exactly.
Or, the little tree on the, on the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
I would imagine that those things are probably not good for our health.
Full of hormone disrupting chemicals, inflammatory in nature, forever chemicals that we can't get out of our body, So all of that stuff, if you can smell it, it's probably causing harm.
Wow. And little weird fact, if you're smelling it, it's in your body. Like it's literally in your body. It's in your brain, because your brain is what's giving you that data. And it's just being more mindful. And thankfully, information like this is getting out about other things.
For sure.
I was so happy to talk to you about this, because I never really thought about it for my car. It's just something I automatically do. My family knows this, even if in an Uber, you know what I'm saying? Usually they keep the window, I crack the window. I always look at the Uber driver, because it's like, most people don't open the window, but I get in there, crack that window immediately. All right. So that's one aspect of this summer fun. Just be more mindful, crack your window, get some fresh air in, let some of that, which is just, it is what it is. We're going to have off-gassing happening inside of our vehicles. Something else that you were talking about, and it's not exclusively to summertime, but it definitely ramps up in the summer months, and that's wearing sunglasses.
Yeah.
Why do we need to be a little bit more mindful about that?
So for me, it stands out because I'm from Toronto, so we have seasons and there's no sunglasses in the winter, and then all of a sudden they all pop up, and I start thinking, oh man, I got to talk and tell people what's going on here. Your eyes, we think of it as just a source of vision and what we see, which is true. Your eyes are an extension of your brain. It's not a separate organ, right? And it's a signaling tool to tell your brain, it's surveying the environment constantly, what's going on. And one of those signals is light, is the clock, the circadian rhythm. What time of day is it, right? That's why you see the sun. When you wake up, you kind of have a sense of what time it is based on the amount of light, the ray of light, the spectrum of light. Those are all signals. And one of the major signals is when the sun hits the retina, that's a signal to tell your body to make melanin, the exact thing you need to protect yourself from a burn. And when you're not wearing, when you are wearing the sunglasses and you're blocking that light, you're not getting the signal. Right? And all of a sudden you wonder why you burn, and then you need sunscreen, which is a whole other thing we can go down rabbit hole on. And so there's this consideration around, whenever I talk about this, I'll always have ophthalmologists and doctors commenting like, no, I see people with cataracts, I see people with issues coming to the office. It's because they don't wear sunglasses. So where is the line? How do you know what's right, what's wrong? Again, a context question. Because those same people, we know, if you study eye health, macular degeneration, for example, we know, academics know, science knows that it's rooted in oxidative stress. So we already know the foundation: poor mitochondrial health, overloading oxidation, whether that's poor exercise or too much or too little, too much or too little food, too much or too little sleep, imbalance, right? So we know what causes it. And most of it has to do with food. So if you're not supporting your mitochondria, and if you're not out exercising your eyes by getting the sunlight regularly, then you're like anyone else that goes to the gym trying to deadlift 400 pounds on day one. It's not going to work, right? You need to build your way up to that. And which means both mitochondrial function, which is a root for all cellular energy, including your eyes. Your eyes, of all the organs in your body, has the third highest density of mitochondria. So heart, brain, then eyes. So that's why they're the first to fail when you don't take care of mitochondrial health and function. And so that context is where you'll hear the doctor saying, someone gets a cataract, someone gets a this, someone gets, if they don't wear sunglasses, which means there's work to do to get healthy first, to be able to utilize the God-given tool you have of being able to make melanin just by looking at the sun.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's one of those things, again, if you look at the data and seeing increased incidence of things like cataracts happening now that didn't used to happen in past generations. And it has a lot to do with our lifestyle. It's not suddenly, sunglasses are the thing that you were just deficient in sunglasses. That's what the issue was. Yeah. And you're also not saying that there isn't a context where sunglasses can be helpful. What are some of those situations?
Driving, glare, skiing, for example, difficult to do, right? And if you are out all day, that peak sun, noon to 2 p.m. type of thing, maybe you might need help and support. But the constant use and I leave the house and I put them on and I can't, without squinting, be outside, there's work to do to be able to do that. You shouldn't have to go into countries go deep into Africa, look at the tribes that are walking around. Where's their sunglasses? Right?
Yeah.
Why there's no Ray-Bans, right? they don't need them because they're out and they've exercised, and their food, their environment, their lifestyle supports their mitochondria, which allows the eye tissue to be young and healthy and thriving. Yeah. No problem.
I really want to hammer home this point. You mentioned how that data coming in through our eyes is one of the primary signaling systems for our body's protection mechanisms, right? So adapting, producing more melanin, and also those circadian cues of producing more melatonin in the evening, right? It's helping to set that circadian rhythm. And if we're constantly shading out the sun, we're not going to get that critical data.
Yeah. So how many people can't sleep because they're wearing sunglasses all day? In the evening, so in the morning and in the evening, the sun is very healing. So sort of prior to 10 a.m. on the average day, there's a much richer red light spectrum. So you can be out there for a long time. You're not going to burn. In fact, you're going to heal. After 4 p.m., it's the same thing. There's a lot of red light. A lot of the white and yellow light is gone. In the evening, you start to get these amber type of hues, right? Our ancestors, keep in mind that our genetics hasn't changed. We are cave people. Our body doesn't know that we're sitting here in a studio and it thinks we're walking out of a cave every morning. So the cue for sleep, that melatonin you talked about, we're meant to see the amber glow of fire in the dark every night. That's what cave people saw for tens of thousands of years. We still are waiting for that signal to bind melatonin. You can make it all day long. We make it. But if you don't bind it and utilize it, you're not going to fall asleep properly, which is why blue light, the opposite, is so disruptive, because it signals to the circadian rhythm. You need to be awake. It's noon when it's actually 9 p.m., right? So knowing that daytime, glasses, blocking what you need to see, evening time, adding things you don't need to see, and then what you would needed was actually that deep amber glow of fire, right? So candlelight, why does it relax you so much? Because you start to bind melatonin. So think about your eyes as a tool beyond just here's what I can see, right? And you'll understand that biochemistry and biology is so much more complex, but also so easy once you understand what to do.
Yeah. It's fascinating hearing this research from you. I started to see several reports of people saying, after I minimized wearing sunglasses, where I was kind of dependent on them at some point, I started to sunburn less. Yeah. And I was like, man, that is so fascinating. Like, it really does have this connection, right? And it just makes sense because all these different inputs, like, we are part of nature and we have all these adaptive mechanisms, but we're very good at putting a clog or putting a cork in things and blocking the flow of our natural processes. And
we very easily atrophy those unique skills and abilities we have. When you don't use them, you lose them. So we are designed for all that. We're designed to be outdoors. We're designed to live like that caveman that was outdoors all day. You don't use a tool, it falls apart, right? But you can build it back up.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got images now, especially you're doing some work with the people in the, making movies and stuff like that. But it's just kind of that template of being, cool and fashionable and, even people, I wear my sunglasses at night, just having this like being part of the ensemble, and sometimes really, and I think about my mom, for example, she would leave the house and just put sunglasses on. Like it was just a part of what she did, especially during the summer months. And it wasn't like she was trying to be cool, but I guess it just felt right, like the right thing to do at the time. And so we're not here to villainize sunglasses. They're a thing. They're cool. They can be helpful in certain instances, but we want to be aware of not wearing them too often and blocking out this critical data to really protect our health.
Yeah.
All right. I heard you in this dictation, you mentioned the S word. All right. You mentioned sunscreen.
Yeah.
All right. Now, again, our bodies produce a natural sunscreen, natural sun protection, but we do have this multi-billion-dollar market of all these different skincare products and, SPF protection. And again, these things have their place, but there are some serious concerns that are now coming to light, pun intended, about these chemical-laden sunscreens. So let's talk a little bit about that.
So the chemical side is now sort of widely spoken of. People know. The functional side and what is a threat and how is sunscreen supposed to protect you and is it actually protecting you? That doesn't get spoken of much. And when you hear it, it blows your mind in terms of what have I been doing all this time? Why have I been doing this? And so the belief is that I applied this sunscreen. There's that SPF, sun protection factor. There's some number of, say 30 SPF means it takes about 20 minutes to get the vitamin D you need. So you're supposed to be in the sun for 20 minutes. After that, your skin starts to burn, which is a signal that you're done. That's why it actually is telling you have enough vitamin D. Why? Because if you have too much, it's actually toxic in nature. You can't overdose on vitamin D. You'll get calcification, plaque, and amongst other things. So we need the right amount of vitamin D. This is why you burn. So we now apply sunscreen so we can stay out in the sun longer and we don't burn. What causes the burn is a UVB ray, right? So it actually literally causes the redness. And most sunscreens are rated with SPF, sun protection factor of, if you have a 30, that means 30 times the 20 minutes. So 600 minutes of being able to be out in the sun, right? Which is what it actually means, which typically doesn't really last so long, but that's what it means. Which means you're going to stay out in the sun longer with this false sense of security that I'm not burning, things must be okay. There's no requirement for sunscreen to also block UVA rays, only UVB. That's the SPF factor is only rated for UVB. UVB is surface level, which is why it burns you. UVA goes deep subcutaneous into the tissue and can cause cellular damage, cellular degradation, DNA damage, which are all precursors to things like cancer, major chronic diseases. So you put this thing on so you don't burn, so you don't feel bad. You go out in the sun, you're still getting UVA because you're going to now be in the sun longer because you feel protected, and you're completely destroying cellular structure subcutaneous deep into tissue that doesn't burn, but it gets damaged and destroyed and damage your DNA and degrade cellular structure at that level. That is literally precursor to cancer. And you wonder why guys like surfers and sun type athletes, volleyball players that got their sunscreen still get skin cancer, right? So it's a complete now there are sunscreens that do it, like there's full spectrum or full protection, I believe they're called. Here's another big challenge. The sunscreens that do block UVA typically use something called avobenzone, right? Which is deemed safe. You remember I was saying earlier that when we study chemicals, we're not studying it in the context it's used. It's studied in a lab and it's studied on paper. And when you practically apply it, things change. And this is why I constantly have sort of arguments with clinicians, scientists, doctors, because they're looking at the paperwork. They're not looking at the patient and their real life and how the thing applies. And I see the people. They need the help, right? So I see the context. Avobenzone, when you take it and put it in the light shreds it apart. That's the reaction. And it turns into benzene, which we know is a potent carcinogenic cancer-causing chemical. It's not in the research anywhere. Avobenzone is safe. And this is the stuff that's supposed to block the UVA, which is beneficial. It's also usually in a water-based type formula, which also evaporates and doesn't last anywhere near the SPF rating of, 30, 40, 50 times the 20 minutes you actually need. It's gone within minutes because it literally evaporates. So, I sat down with this brilliant guy. His name's Gary Grun. He's from Duke University, and he's a chemical engineer. And so he's been studying this stuff forever. And he said there's simple things you can do, like just use a glycerine base that doesn't evaporate. Use a mineral base that is not avobenzone, that does not convert to benzene, that won't give you cancer, right? The phthalates, forever chemicals that are in these things that are causing hormone disruption. How many women are lathering themselves up and not knowing that the chemical, the phthalates, for example, will enter your body doesn't recognize it thinks it's estrogen, allows it to use an estrogen docking station, and now you're not using your estrogens, would then become inflammatory in nature because they don't know where to go, so they end up in your tissue where they're not supposed to be. So there's a whole cascade of problems. I can go on and on, speak 1 hour just about sunscreen, but if you do things right, one last thing I'll say about this, because I know what people think, well, what do? I'm going to burn, right? It's like I burn, I need sunscreen. There was a study out of Baylor College, in Texas, where they took a bunch of animals, gave half of them what they called an American diet, which meant high in high fructose corn syrup, starch, seed oils, things of that nature. And the other half were fed carnivore, straight carnivore. The animals that ate the American diet, 25% got skin cancer. The animals that ate the carnivore, 0. So why do I say this? Because the reason you burn is because your skin is already inflamed. You're already doing things to your body to be in an inflamed state where you can't handle what you were meant to be able to handle, right? You also go outside once and for an hour on the weekend, as opposed to our ancestors who are outside all the time. 95% of your time is indoors, right? So that resilience isn't there. So yes, protect yourself. Yes, don't make yourself sick. There's other ways to do it with minerals, zinc, things of that nature, glycerin-based products. And just know that if you do burn, you're not supposed to. It probably has to do with the food you're eating and the state that you're in, as opposed to the sun, which is meant to be healing, hitting your skin, right?
Yeah. Just like in anything, we have to qualify ourselves to do a certain thing, right? Yeah. So you just mentioned, like, what we usually do is work, these long hours throughout the year and maybe get 5-10 minutes at the most of some kind of abstract sun exposure just to take a vacation to suddenly put ourselves in the sun for several hours, right? So it's like 0 to 100. It's like 10 minutes of sun exposure to suddenly 2 hours. And we have not qualified ourselves. We've not qualified our antioxidant systems, our skin health, and even, our vision, all these different things to be able to properly adapt. And that's part of the issue is, just the way that our society is structured is contributing to this problem. But then what we do is we look for a crutch. So we mentioned earlier the crutch was sunglasses. Now the crutch is the sunscreen. So we can try to hack this system and appear to be safe, right? The sun can't see me. I'm a day walker. I got this cream all over my body. Whoa, pause. So I'm thinking about the movie Blade. All right. So there was a scene, because Blade is a day walker. Right. But also, just so happens to be dark skin. But then the other vampires, and this is Blade 1. So this is the OG Blade. He sees him outside. They got all this sunscreen on, right? He's just like, how you out here? They got slathered up. Of course, they got, some jackets and stuff. That's another thing, just wearing a hat, wearing something to, provide a little bit of shade for your skin. But most importantly, what I'm hearing is to be sensible, right? Common sense is very uncommon. Build up your natural resilience, build up your melanin, and everybody makes melanin to some degree, right? There's different degrees of this, but we all can build up a tolerance to being in the sun and also paying attention to that feedback of like when you're in the sun too long. There's this amazing analysis that was published in The Lancet, all right? And the title of this study is The Questionable Effects of Sunscreen, all right? And the researchers state, in regards to the dramatic increase in the purchase of sunscreen and utilization of sunscreen, there has been an increase, paradoxically, in cancer, right? And what it's supposed to be protecting, skin cancer. And so the researchers stated, quote, "This increase is the reverse of what is expected given the continued increased purchase of sunscreen per head in the US and UK since the 1990s. They go on to state the contradiction suggests that increased population exposure to sunscreen does not translate into a reduced risk of skin cancer. This finding is particularly important for public health measures to prevent non-melanoma skin cancer and melanoma. It could be that sunscreens are being improperly used or they are ineffective in the prevention of skin cancer, or that other factors not relating to UV light are leading to an increased risk of non-melanoma skin cancer and melanoma," unquote.
Yeah. It's not just not effective. It's like, it's a cause, because you're putting yourself out into the thing that you can't handle. They're talking about cancer. Another reason why there's so many more sunscreen products is because the cosmetic companies now make them as wrinkle proof type products, right? The sun's going to give you wrinkles. Well, the wrinkles don't come from the UVB, they come from the UVA, which you're not blocking. And once again, same story as the cancer. You're putting something on with a false sense of security, only blocking the UVB. UVA is still deeply penetrating your skin tissue, subcutaneous beyond the fat, causing wrinkles. The exact opposite of why you bought the product. And the formulators themselves don't understand what they're building. Right? They haven't looked at the science and what's actually going on. Yeah.
Something you said earlier really jumped out, and understanding how important, like there's this paradox again, we're trying to block out the sun to prevent cancer, but one of the most powerful anti-cancer compounds that we produce is vitamin D.
Yeah.
And the researchers mentioned that too. In that same study, they said sunscreen has the potential to have negative effects since synthesis of vitamin D relies on UVB radiation. And since vitamin D deficiency has been linked to the pathogenesis of many diseases, it is crucial that the effectiveness of sunscreens and their use are thoroughly investigated. So they're just like, people could be just putting it on wrong. We should investigate this more, but something's not working out here. Something's not adding up.
25,000 genes in the human genome, 2,500, 10%, require adequate vitamin D levels to do their jobs. So every single biological instruction that your cells receive, that's what a gene is, an instruction. Some of them just don't work if there's not enough vitamin D to bind and activate, and from hormones to hair to skin to mood. This is why you have seasonal mood disorder in the winter. So now you're going to have it in the summer because people are blocking vitamin D. Yeah, so it's the single most important nutrient, and we're cutting it out by lathering ourselves up.
Oh man, what are we doing?
Yeah.
We're so silly. So with this being said, a couple of practical things. I'm hearing to really be mindful and looking into the ingredients of any potential sunscreen that you might be buying. Thankfully, again, having these conversations, there are companies that are producing cleaner versions of these things, and there's degrees of all this stuff. But also, and what I'm hearing most importantly, foundationally, is understanding that what you're eating is creating your skin.
Yeah.
And your skin's ability to interact with the sun intelligently. And so if you're making yourself out of, all these different ultra processed vegetable oils, for example, and that oils are helping to kind of create the cell membranes of your skin cells, for example, you're just basically turning into a McDonald's French fry on the beach. You know what I'm saying? Like the sun is cooking you.
Yeah.
So it's a different phenomenon. So making your body out of more resilient, high quality nutrients, ensuring that you are getting that vitamin D input, but also being intelligent. This is not saying don't use a sunscreen, but be very, very mindful about the sunscreen that you're using. And for many of us, if we're just building up our natural sun protection, we won't have to worry about this stuff much at all, because again, there are so many cultures all over the world that aren't using sunscreen and they don't have these issues.
Yeah, and they're out in the sun a lot longer than us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I want to circle back to our vision, because there is this strange phenomenon that is skyrocketing in our society, in particular with our kids. And I'm bringing this up because the summertime for us, I know I have this very nostalgic drive. Like it reminds me of like going outside and playing with my friends, literally like from sun up to sundown and, you know, going and playing basketball all day, playing football. You know, we might go in and play video games a little bit, but we just want to go outside, go ride our bikes, right? It's just this endless possibilities of fun. And today, less kids are spending time outside and playing.
Yeah.
And they're spending more time on their devices, in particular, you know, smartphones and iPads and things like that have this very close proximity to our bodies. And this is leading to some issues with our kids' vision. So let's talk about that.
In a big way. We'll talk about the vision. It's not only vision. You have, I think it was the 1960s, 6% of youth had a chronic disease. It's now 60. How did that happen? 60. You remember when you were in school, like be very unusual just for someone to need medication. Now it's the majority. That's the truth. 60%, right? So in terms of vision, I actually learned this through my niece, unfortunately. I took her to get new glasses, and I was told she has a hole in her eye. I was like, how does this even happen? Like, what does that mean? And they said, yeah, it's pretty typical. I said, how typical? I've never heard this before. How can it be typical? And what I realized, it was typical for the current young ophthalmologist I was dealing with, who's now dealing with the current reality of Gen Z and beyond. And if you talk to someone who's a more mature ophthalmologist who's been doing it for a while, it's not normal for them. They didn't see it. So it's become the norm. I sit on my phone or I'm on my laptop, and the structure of the eye literally forming and changing and being stretched into a myopic form is literally leading to these tears in the fiber and tissue, which leads to whole. And really what I was told was, let's monitor this and see if she needs medication or surgery. I was like, how is that the answer? And like, what caused this? And so I started to look into the health of the eye and found, after speaking to ophthalmologists and optometrists, in whether it was in Toronto, I talked to some in New York, California, all over the place. And they're like, yeah, this is pretty common now. That was the answer. And so it's device driven, right? It's this nearsighted, like, you're not supposed to be doing this. We weren't designed for it. And what did I do with my niece? I literally took her outside and got her to do some distance gazing, like go look at a tree, right? Let's play a sport like baseball where you have to be out in the field and focus on the batsman or whatever you're doing, right? And that was it. That's what healed her. It took some number of months. Next appointment, didn't have the problem anymore. So this challenge over our culture, like you said, is no longer go outside and play. It's now helicopter mom, don't go outside. I need to be seeing where you are all the time, right? Which does things, we can go deep into what that does to the mind. But in terms of what it's doing to the body, it's no movement. And it's this literal structural change of the eye that's leading to vision damage and often loss. Blindness in young people is now a known thing that is just accepted. But the source isn't been spoken of. Get them off the devices, right? And get them to go outside and look. Go focus on a leaf that's like rustling in the wind. That's what they need to be doing, because that's what the eyes were designed to do.
Yeah. Wow. So something practical here that I'm hearing is simply, even for us, of course, as adults, we spend a lot of time on our computers. Thankfully, I intentionally set things up where my computer is by a window, right? So the window's right behind it, and I'll occasionally just literally look out into the furthest distance that I can, like a treetop, because it's kind of like, as we're staring at this fixed distance, we're like putting our vision into a cast, right? So these different, cones and rods and, the retina and all the different aspects of the eye that need to like zoom in and change focus and be able to do all these dynamic things, they kind of get set in place. Now they're doing something dynamic, some dynamic dancing around because of the changes on the screen, but it's at a fixed distance.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it's like handicapping our vision. And so we're basically forcing our eyes to be very good at seeing at a fixed position and starting to struggle seeing things that are further off in the distance. So that's what nearsightedness is.
And in order to do that, your literal eye structure has to change to accommodate what it was never meant to do.
Yeah.
That's what's causing the damage.
Holy moly. All right. So it's summertime. Let's get the kids outside, and you mentioned, the hyperprotective parenting and, it's just, it's one of the things of our generation because, some of us are like looking to really be protective of the trauma that we might have gone through, or especially, growing up in the 80s, you know, you got the crime stories, you know, you got the big headlines with, you know, kidnapping and things like that. But this was a very, very fractional issue. But it's one of those things that, of course, it grabs us as parents and, you know, wanting to be protective. And if we went through anything, you know, any trauma or abuse happened to us as kids, we want to protect our kids at all costs from that. Absolutely. And we don't want to do that at the detriment of allowing our kids to explore and to grow and to be able to self-manage and to make decisions, right? So I'm a big fan of creating safe stressors in a safe space for my kids to explore and to do things. And also, you know, it's that process of letting go over time as well. And I remember when my older son, you know, he got hit on his bike and it'd just be gone all day, you know? But it's just like getting him to the place where he would make smarter decisions and trusting. And also understanding that I can't be there all the time, and there's got to be some kind of grace in letting him to get out and explore. And now, with that being said, you know, we do want to be mindful about the situations that we're putting our kids in or allowing, yes. And also, you know, and what I'm thinking about is like Stranger Things. Right. And these kids getting out on these adventures, you know, jumping on the bicycle, going to their friends. Now, our kids are not probably going to run up against a Demogorgon. Right. But, you know, what this is invoking, and I'll just give a good example, actually. So yesterday, my youngest son, and he had a basketball tournament this past weekend. There's a lot of games, you know, he's kind of banged up, you know, and then he had practice the next day on a Monday. And so he, of course, just wants to lounge and relax and recover and play video games. And he did. Like, he's playing video games for a couple of hours. But he knows our culture. And so I'm up in my office working, and I hear outside the basketball dribbling. He's just out. He knows to get outside. I've been sitting around all day. Let me go outside, get some movement in, you know, shoot around, you know, get some fresh air, get some sunlight. And just little things like that. It doesn't have to be all or nothing.
And there's an element when you don't do that, you remove a very important part of development for the brain also, what we call dangerous play. The kids need to actually take risks and hurt themselves, right? And there's a lot of research, whether you go to Harvard, there's some universities in Europe that study places like Finland where the education system is completely different, right? And they see that the children that thrive, that become leaders, we study them in their state. We study a leader today. We don't study where they came from. So there's research studying how do they start? What do they do to develop the habits to get here? And a lot of it is centered around dangerous play. And the opposite is also true, that the kids that didn't thrive, that didn't get into leadership roles, that were pigeonholed into something that was lesser than their potential, were helicoptered. They were never, the box was always closed, and they couldn't go out and think and develop those parts of their brain that allowed them to take the risk, do more, right? So letting a kid go on the monkey bars that feels dangerous and fall and hurt something is actually a very good thing for them, right? Especially, by the way, for boys. It actually means more for mental development for boys than it does for girls.
Man, when I think about the things I was doing, you know, at my son's age, climbing up on, you know, people's roofs and, you know, jumping off of stuff just to see like how far down you could jump, right? Well, it's the highest distance we could jump off.
You push the limit. And the thing about pushing the limit is the more you push it, the greater the limit becomes. Right? There's this lady that teaches all these Silicon Valley companies about how to get the most productivity. And she has this example of we're both holding an elastic band. You hold one end, I hold one end. And I kind of pull it until it's tense. And then you have to kind of pull towards me. And then I pull it again. And you have to step towards me, and I pull it again. And you just slowly keep improving somebody's maximum potential or threshold for what they think is possible. And it just keeps growing.
One of the other things that I think about in regards to summer that can provide us a lot of benefit was I had a very unique experience of my grandmother moving to what we call the country. And, you know, she basically had a cabin in the woods kind of ordeals, a dirt road to get to her house. And so we spent a lot of time, you know, being in the woods, right? And now there's a lot of data on how nurturing and healing and health supporting, just getting out in nature, but in particular, this practice of forest bathing.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
So I had this experience when I was young where I had one of my best friends never got sick, right? And I was always sick. So I now know a lot of it was related to my gut, but why did he not get sick? In the school with all the other kids, didn't have an issue. He did live out in the woods. There's an oil in most trees called phytoncide, right? When you're out amongst the trees, you're actually breathing it in and inhaling it. And it's antimicrobial, antifungal, antiparasitics, anti-everything, which was how the trees protect themselves. And you are meant to benefit from this. So remember, our body thinks we live like our ancestors. So it thinks it can depend on those habits. It thinks that we're getting those exposures that our ancestors got, including breathing in phytoncide from the trees, which is one of the ways we build our immunity. And if you don't have it, the body doesn't know how to compensate because it doesn't have its own pharmacy to make things, right? So that's one major thing you'll see in young kids that are out in the dirt playing, breathing it in. There's microbial activity. It populates their gut microbiome, populates their skin microbiome, builds their immune system so that they're more resilient. But beyond that, this just being in the woods, being in the trees, we now know a lot more about quantum science and quantum physics, and that everything is frequency, everything is particles, and the frequency, when you put something into your body, ultimately, how does it communicate to a cell? It's through some level of frequency, right? When you're out in the woods, the leaves, the crackling, all those things that we take for granted as just peaceful are actually communicating to our cells and our biology to activate certain processes, turning things on and turning things off. This is why if you go for a hike, your anxiety goes away. You calm down, right? Your body knows I'm not in a fight or flight right now. When you're in the drywall box and you're in front of your screen and you're getting the blue light, your fight or flight turns on. The warrior state turns on. Time for battle, which was not meant to happen to the degree and chronic nature that it happens now today. We are meant to be more in that regenerative state than we are meant to be in the fight or flight, but it's literally the opposite. So that bathing is literally rinsing the inflammation of stress and cortisol off of your cells, right? And there's very few ways to do that. We know how to detoxify heavy metals through chelation. We know how to detoxify plastics and things of that nature. We don't think about how to detoxify the inflammation of cortisol, of stress. Meditation is a great tool. Forest bathing is another one. When cortisol comes down and that stress response is reduced, your immune system also becomes more robust. Your vagus nerve becomes more resilient. The vagus nerve, which is communicating to your entire body what state to be in. Are you actually, when you're popping all your supplements and doing your red light, etc., are you getting ROI because you're actually in a regenerative state? Or are you walking into that when in a fight or flight where the body doesn't want to heal anyway? It's not going to fix anything. It doesn't matter what you do, right? So this, what seems like a simple thing, a weekend hike, can literally completely change immune system. It can change stress state, anxiety. You're going to get from the plants both frequency and certain compounds that are going to heal your body.
I got to be honest with you. When I first heard the term forest bathing, I thought it was like going butt naked in the forest and like getting into a hot springs, something like that. But it's literally just bathing in that environment.
In the environment, yeah. Getting all what it's supposed to give you. Yeah.
Wow. It just makes perfect sense. And we've got some really fascinating data now on studying green spaces and blue spaces, right? So being near bodies of water and also being in the forest and all these different things that it does, like literally strapping people up to all these different, EKGs and measuring what's happening with the brain and the nervous system and, tracking what's happening with neurotransmitters and hormone production. There is a significant changeover from this sympathetic fight or flight to more parasympathetic, regenerative, healing state in your body by being in nature. And it's just, again, like this is where we come from. It's just like returning back to our source and getting closer to it. So that's really fascinating. So what would you recommend, as far as like not everybody just on the surface has access to, going to a forest? What can we do?
Nature in general. Even we know that you're hearing it everywhere, grounding, being outside, just even on your lawn, right? Just stepping out. When was the last time you literally went barefoot out onto your lawn and felt what a blade of grass feels like, right? Going to a park. A forest is an extreme. And like you said, not everyone has access of that nature. But where are you? What's the closest natural thing you have access to? It may be the beach, right? The beach has a very similar outcome. When you're standing there, you're getting the negative ions that are literally detoxifying you at an electric level, right? So now you have this circuit that's closing. We are electric beings, as we know. So wherever you are, there's going to be something that is natural, that was a God-given gift to the planet. You go there and you bathe in it, right? Whether it's even your backyard, whether you're going to a nursery with plants, you'll feel it there, right? Whether it's an animal and you're hugging an animal and getting the oxytocin, right? And you're getting that hormone that builds all other hormones. So just stepping away from our digital box and going back to things that are real.
Yeah, I love it. Now, you mentioned going outside, simply just going outside, having your shoes off and getting grounded. Curveball, what if you're stepping into your lawn that's showered with Roundup? What about that?
Yeah. Problem, for sure. Problem. So step one is you're not using this stuff, right? So there's lots of videos online of people that are now using things like vinegars and certain oils and things to kill. My neighbor brings out a blowtorch and burns all his weeds on his driveway.
Your neighbor has, first of all, your neighbor has a blowtorch?
Yeah. He literally has a blowtorch that he burns his weeds off with on the driveway, not on the lawn. But there are a lot of, first of all, don't use Roundup. This year alone, we've seen more class action payouts than ever before. Every month there's a multi-$100 million level payout, right? And all around cancer, lymphomas, things of that nature. California, by the way, big here. There's been a lot of payouts recently. And so how much more do we need to be told that this is happening? How much more does this need to be true? We're literally, I think last year, north of $2 billion was paid out to different people for different lawsuits for this one thing that we still spray on our lawn and then your kids play on. So get it out, get rid of it.
All right, so let me get this straight. So in Canada, you can have a blowtorch, but you can't buy or create supplements.
This is true. So I still can today, but if you go to a large supplement store today, you'll see right there on their cashier desk, petition, please make sure we're still open next year.
Yeah.
Because laws have been passed to make sure that you can't buy natural health products.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously, it's a little tongue in cheek because it's not official there right now, but it is in process to eliminate a lot of quote natural health access, which is silly. We got to make this distinction, but being able to buy supplements and things like that, and just really pressing this pharmacology as really the only route to go to. And these are opportunities for us to do something about it. We've got amazing people that are listening in Canada right now who have the ability to step up, say something, do something. And our decisions right now are going to impact future generations, our kids, their kids, and the like. And so a lot of silliness, and a lot of this is happening kind of like under the radar, right? And they're sliding things into different bills. So there might be a bill to do some construction in your area, get the roads fixed, but then they slide in a thing like, you can't buy vitamin C or you're going to die, you're going to put you in jail.
I'll tell you a behind the scenes story of how ridiculous it is. And why is this happening? Canada is unique, where unlike where we are now, there's insurance companies, there's private medicine, there's hospitals, they're all corporate, right? You have a single payer, the government. So very easy to lobby and control. So Ontario, where I live, has a $68 billion budget for healthcare, and there's one entity paying the checks, paying everybody. And so I've sat with our finance ministers and health ministers in organizations where it's me and a bunch of pharma CEOs. Literally, I can tell you about a scenario where it's me and a table full of pharma CEOs trying to plan the future of healthcare of Ontario, right? There was a person that was asked to sort of steward this meeting, and hands were going up with ideas. And I said, right now we have a crisis where people, autistic children, for example, are on a waiting list for 5 years to get things that are actually available in the store. But meanwhile, there's certain surgeries people that they elect for that they can get tomorrow, right? That are not even necessary. So why is this happening? And I said, I think I have a solution. Most of those kids didn't need to be autistic. There was an exposure to a certain chemical, etc. So if we can be proactive about it, then we can slice this budget and then nobody has to worry. Another guy raises his hand, pharma CEO. I have an idea. If we have a button that somebody in a hospital bed can push and a robot can deliver the medication, then we don't need to wait for the nurse. And that's going to save us money. That's the solution they went for. So this was literally a meeting with all these people where we're planning the future of healthcare. And so when you have the 3-letter agencies that don't display any behavior that showcase that they're working for you, the citizens, right? When all of their behavior shows that they're very obviously working for someone else. That is a battle that's hard to deal with. And that's why you have what we have in Canada. I'm not going to be able to buy supplements next year, truly, right? I'll have to smuggle them in or just get my vitamin C when I fly down to see you, right? Like truly, that's what's going to happen. So, and it's happening here. Why is it that Roundup and what we just talked about is still available when billions of dollars have been paid out? Who are the agencies working for? Who are they working? If that's the case, when it's so obvious in your face that a clinician says that this caused it, a judge says, yes, I agree, now pay this person $100 million, and you can still buy it on a shelf.
Man, this is bringing up for me, just this conversation about summer and wellness. And, we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about so many interesting topics. And I was thinking about, when my mom was leaving the house and throwing on her sunglasses and grabbing her cigarette case, right? So she had a cigarette case. Yeah. She kept her money in there, little, whatever, food stamps and a cigarette case. And, there was a time when actually as a child, I was in elementary school, I could buy her cigarettes for her, right? She sent me to 7-Eleven every day and buy some, Benson and Hedges menthol. Yeah. Right. I remember the damn name. But today, a lot of folks are trying to sidestep, in a way, their interaction with conventional cigarettes and looking at vaping as a better option, So when you're thinking about going outside and getting some grounding in, you might want to bring your vape pen with you. But Kashif's got some information about this.
So it's the same false sense of security when you have data that is not contextual, that is not practical in terms of what's actually going on, when it's extracted elements of what's in this vape, each independently studied, not compounded, put together into what's actually happening in the human body, right? So there finally has now been research. And the sad thing is the research exists because people have been doing it for a while. So now we're seeing the outcome, right? Before it was like study these ingredients in a lab and make sure that it passes because we want to sell this stuff. Now it's like people are sick. How did they get sick? So one study alone found a 19% increase in heart failure, random heart failure, kids collapsing, right? 35% increase in heart attacks out of the blue with vape users. Again, they compared, right? Vape users to not. And after having progressed into many years of this, what's going on with their health? And these are young people, by the way. 25% increase in coronary artery disease. So they're having this plaque buildup and they're getting set up for the heart attack. There's also lung disorders to the point of hospitalization and death. There's something called EVALI, which affects the lungs. So we finally have data that's showing us that this thing that was, again, siloed and independent, look at each ingredient in the lab, claimed as safe, when you actually practically apply it, is not. And so when you give somebody this false sense of security, it's not only the thing is dangerous, but there's no fear of overdoing it. And when you see someone with a vape, it's not like a cigarette where they smoke, go for their break and come back. It's constant. It's all the time because this is safe and it's so easy to do. And that's another layer to why it's making people so sick. Because when you study it, you study in the context of you're supposed to puff it once every 3 hours, something along those lines, as opposed to a kid is just on this thing all the time, overdosing to the point where we now have data showing it's leading to the same thing cigarettes lead to, heart disease and lung disease.
Just from the surface level, if you look at the act of smoking and it being like the smoke itself is the issue, like why is vaping causing these health concerns?
Oh, so what in the vape? Yeah, so the compounds that are in the vape that are considered, so the glycerin sometimes is often used, and the other compounds like the flavors, the binders, all of what makes it stable, for example. So when you study just like when you study vaccination and you look at the actual active molecule that is the drug is considered safe, but then the heavy metals and aluminums and mercury and lead and everything that it takes to make the academic formula and deliver it is not safe, but that's not studied, right? So when you add the artificial flavors and you add the compounds that make it deliverable, those are the things that add up and over time create plaque, create heart disease, create lung disease. So, and they don't get studied. The ingredient, whatever the thing that is meant to replace a cigarette is what's actually studied.
Fascinating. And just understanding again how this is affecting kids so much right now. Of course, like my mom, for example, she shared that she started smoking when she was like 12, right? Of course, sneaking around doing this with her friends, that kind of thing. So kids have been smoking for some time. But with vaping, it's so clearly marketed to kids and having these different flavors, and it's just like it's so obvious. And there's been some litigation to try to remove some of these kind of kid-friendly flavors of these vapes, but it's so crazy. Like, again, these same industries that seduced healthcare and had doctors promoting smoking as totally safe, something to relax and, help with this, pain relief, whatever the case might be. And then coming out later, actually, this was just completely made up. And we've seen this change happen with things like sugar as well. And now, again, seeing this invasion of vaping that's happening and wondering why so many kids are being seduced by it. It's marketed to children.
Where I live in Toronto, the guy that brought vaping to Toronto, one of the first pioneers, was Toronto's leading cardiologist as a safe alternative. He's like, this is the future of smoking, man. And he brought it in and he said, everybody should be doing this. And then when you have that face promoting it, the false sense of security once again, right? And that happened in a lot of places.
All right. I want to close out on a happy note, being that it is summertime. And, this is also an opportunity, some of the other things that really come up for me thinking about summer is delicious food. Yeah. Delicious food experiences. You just shared that you had an orange watermelon.
It was mind-blowing, man. I didn't know what I was eating, but it was incredible. Yeah.
Well, there's so many different varieties of foods that when we go to a conventional grocery store, we see these very cookie cutter, consistent things, but there's so much to explore. So what are some foods from your perspective that we can look out for or enjoy during the summer months to improve our health?
So when you really eat real stuff, it is so nutrient dense and powerful and healing. You don't need medication, right? If you're eating clean and you know so much about this, everything's prevented. That's one of our major causes other than EMF. There's so many other things we could talk about, but food is a big one. So for example, blueberries, the study on anthocyanin, a very potent antioxidant that you find in blueberries. In old UK, prior to modern industrialization, eating blueberries until you turn blue used to be the cure for breast cancer because of the anthocyanin delivery that killed cancer cells, right? When you're making your smoothie, your summer drinks, your shakes, right? You can add something called spirulina. And if you specifically add blue spirulina, the actual pigment that makes it blue is called phycocyanin, and it's used to make chemotherapy. Literally, because if you take phycocyanin and throw it in a petri dish with cancer cells die. So that's got synthesized into chemo now. You can literally just add blue spirulina, which is also very neurostimulatory. It's great for your brain. You're going to have crazy, vivid dreams at night, and you're going to have better neural activity, but it's going to go in your body and look for cancer and kill it, right? You also, one thing we miss from our food supply is when you think about the ancestral relationship with plants. We had a farm, you would used to harvest the yield, and it was too much for that time. You had to store it somehow, right? Not like we have our industrial farming that's constantly replacing. And so the habit was ferment it, put it into a pickle or put some lime on it, rot it, and literally ferment it until it's rotten. And that's what would make it last. So our body still expects that we eat fermented food regularly to populate our gut microbiome, and we don't. So add that simple kimchi, sauerkraut, some kombucha, something fermented, make it a daily habit. Switch out your alcoholic drink for a bottle of kombucha or kefir, right? Something that was going to give it to you, because your gut needs a constant maintenance of its gut microbiome, right? Beyond that, I just was speaking recently about carrots and how they themselves used to be used as cancer treatment, right? The beta carotene, that's simple things like we call them vitamins, vitamin A, they do so much more than the names they've been given. So retinol or beta carotene and the work that they do in the body to build linings of your body to support immune function. So even just loading up on grilling a little bit of vegetables with the meat, right? Like a carrot, for example, I could go on and on and on, but if you look at the habits of people that actually get to longevity with good health, it's usually a few things. They're eating foods that provide a lot of minerals. So you're going to find, for example, the Okinawa Japanese, they eat seaweed, which is in the water, drawing all the minerals from the sea and giving it to them. So find a source for minerals. Find whether it's a sea moss or supplementing with minerals, or the spirulina I mentioned earlier, combine that with a chlorella, you're going to get a great mineral spectrum. If you take all the minerals out of your body, there's a puddle of water. That's what's left. Every structural component, your bone is not just calcium. It needs 61 minerals to develop. So you constantly have this need, right? That's one thing you'll find in these populations. The second thing you'll find is the fermented food supports their gut. They don't get chronic disease because most chronic disease is tied to poor gut health, right? You'll also find protein, and you'll find protein that's rich in things like omega, like seafood, for example, right? You're also going to find the antioxidants. I mentioned anthocyanin earlier in the blueberries. The Japanese get it from purple sweet potato. That's where they get their anthocyanin from, right? And then you're going to find stuff that if you want to live long and healthy, the thing that fails first is typically the brain. So you want to fuel and feed the brain, right? You want to give it structural, simple thing. The one compound your brain needs to connect new neural pathways. So every time you're learning a new skill, considering a new concept, you actually need new physical hardware in your brain to actually process and do that. And the thing that connects these neurons is called choline, right? One of the best sources we have for choline is egg yolk. And we throw the yolk in the garbage and eat the white because we're trying to be healthy, right? And if you have industrial egg, I understand, but pasture-raised, organic, clean, proper stuff, that egg yolk is so dense in nutrition, you don't need much more food in that day. So a couple eggs per day. So again, I can keep going, but those are some big things that people can do.
I love it, man. You just checked off a lot of boxes for us, man. This has been an adventure and so insightful. Where can people follow you, get more information?
Yeah, Instagram is the best way. I have a daily rant where I got to complain about something, you know.
It's so good too.
Yeah. So, and there's also tips and things, you know, food. I just remember another one, but yeah, so Kashif Khan Official, right? So join me there, and it's purely education. All of what I learned in our clinical practice, I like to share and show people what's actually making us sick and what's actually making us healthy.
Awesome. And that's with the K.
With the K, yeah.
Kashif with the K.
Yeah.
Man, I appreciate you so much again. Thank you for coming to hang out with us. You know, I know you're on a really cool trip. You're making some incredible things happen in the world that, of course, we'll talk about more in the future.
Sure.
But, you know, this has been fun, man. Thank you.
Pleasure, man. Great to be here.
Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here. UV light, ultraviolet light in particular, is most notable when it comes to skin damage. UV light from the sun also does many wonderful things, like killing pathogens,